Mr. O'Toole, thank you for joining us on the airwaves of Connect FM.
Good morning, Vijay. It's my pleasure.
So, Mr. O'Toole, do you have candidates in all of the 338 ridings in the country?
We are down to almost all ridings, 338, and we should have that in the next day or so, Vijay. We're ahead of the other parties. Obviously, Mr. Trudeau called a snap election in the middle of a pandemic with forest fires and the terrible situation in Afghanistan. I don't think it's a time for an election, but we moved really quick, and we will have great candidates in every riding. We've got Canada's Recovery Plan, our platform we launched on day 2, and we're keen to show people we've got a plan to get this country back on its feet.
Mr. O'Toole, Liberal leader Justin Trudeau earlier today announced his plans for increasing housing affordability in the country, and he has lifted a couple of key promises that you had made earlier. Do you see this as an endorsement of your ideas on the issue?
That's a good point, Vijay. I see it as him copying parts of our ideas. I also see it an admission that Mr. Trudeau has failed over 6 years. The housing crisis we're in has only gotten worse in the last 3 to 4 years, Vijay. People in the lower mainland of BC, in the Toronto area where I'm from, we see that. So we put forward huge policies to get more affordable homes in front of families. We not only said we would ban foreign non-resident buying for 2 years, we're going to dedicate 15% of the federally owned lands and buildings for more supply. We're going to make density a requirement in transit. We're going to fix and make mortgages more available to first-time home buyers. So we have a very detailed package, and Mr. Trudeau, after 6 years of doing nothing, lifted a few of our ideas and really put forward no clear plan to deal with the housing crisis.
Now, Mr. O'Toole, with all these ideas that you have suggested, if this leads to a slowdown in the housing market, that will impact the coffers of provincial governments in various provinces, which depend on the property transfer revenue. So would you also then have to bring in some sort of a support for the provincial government to make up for that loss in revenue?
No, we don't see that, Vijay, because we also have policies in here to incentivize the construction of dedicated rental housing. This is another part of the housing crisis. People can't afford to rent in large urban and suburban areas, and they need to be close to work, right? So we are going to shift both local investment in Canada and foreign money. If they want to invest in our housing market, we don't want it to be in homes or units. We want it in purpose-built rental housing. So we really think we will see more construction, we will see that economic activity, and we will see a lowering in prices because we'll have more supply, we'll take some of the foreign money out of there. But I don't see this as being disruptive to provinces because we still need rental housing. We need to see an economy that's booming, and we have a job surge. We have so many things in our Canada Recovery Plan to get the economy moving, and provinces will do well because of that economic growth.
Also, Mr. O'Toole, this pandemic has highlighted the importance of sound universal healthcare in the country. What concerns you most about our current Canadian healthcare model?
Well, what concerns me most, Vijay, is the fact that we found some gaps in healthcare and long-term care for seniors in the pandemic. We weren't ready. So I'm a 100% supporter of public and universal healthcare. I always have been. So in our plan on day 2, we'd launched the largest investment in healthcare in a generation. We're committing $60 billion of new money to the public health system over the next 10 years to allow provinces to deal with some of the gaps that were exposed in COVID-19, to help provinces get wait times down and give a little relief to our frontline healthcare workers who've been our heroes in the last year and a half. So I've been very transparent about building up the healthcare system. And in recent days, as you know, Vijay, Mr. Trudeau has been caught by Twitter misleading people online in this election. The first time ever we've seen Canadian politicians import American-style misleading media. It is a sign that Mr. Trudeau has no plan and is willing to essentially mislead and lie to Canadians to get reelected. I think that's a bad example to set, so we're going to just keep talking about our positive vision to get the country moving.
Do you think, Mr. O'Toole, there is any scope and space for privatization in Canadian healthcare?
The most fundamental principles of our healthcare system, Vijay, is free access and choice for Canadians. We'd like to see wait times down. We'd like to see more choice for Canadians. So as we increase funding, give stable, predictable funding to the provinces, decisions they make to lower wait times and to provide more choice within our universal system, I will respect the provinces because the needs in BC are very different from the needs in Newfoundland, for example. And the last thing Ottawa should be doing is dictating, picking fights with Premier Horgan or Premier Moe or Premier Legault. That's not how you build a united country. You respect one another. And as a federal partner, I'm giving predictable, major increases to healthcare to let the provinces build up great systems for their people.
Mr. O'Toole, over the last couple of days, you've made some announcements about more inclusion of workers in the boardrooms of corporations. This morning, you were talking about protecting pensions for those individuals whose companies go bankrupt. So with all of that, the labor unions are still very skeptical of your pitch as a conservative leader with all the things that you're proposing for better protection to the people in the workforce. What do you say to them so that they can overcome that skepticism?
Well, it's in our recovery plan. As you said, we've provided pension protection. We're going to provide a seat at the board table for workers. I come from in a community outside Toronto, Vijay, where my dad worked at General Motors. I respect unions. I respect working families, and I'm going to fight for them. So it will take some time for people to see our plan and see our major commitments to working families. And I'm more than happy to win over the trust of people over the course of this election. But we put out serious plans to give working Canadians a seat at the table. And unlike Mr. Trudeau and Mr. Singh, who only want certain sections of the economy to come back, they don't like jobs in softwood lumber or energy or resources. We want to see an economic recovery for all families in all parts of the country. And workers, I want to partner with them, including their unions, to grow our economy.
When you say that growing the economy across all sectors, you've also admitted that some of the conservative supporters are frustrated with the climate plan that you've released. How do you convince your voters in Alberta, which is traditionally a conservative stronghold, and if the numbers are to be believed, that's where your support seems to be dwindling. So what do you tell voters in Alberta, where carbon tax, for many voters, it's almost like a bad word? How do you convince those voters that they should believe in this plan and vote for you?
Because we put the plan out in April, Vijay. I knew that the Conservatives having a very strong, forward-thinking environmental plan that will meet our Paris targets, it was going to be a bold move for a new Conservative leader. So I didn't wait for the election. I put it out in April. And I've been talking about how we can get people back to work in Alberta, in northern BC, and Saskatchewan, have a price on carbon so we can get our emissions down. But our plan, which we worked with a BC-based modeling firm to come up with a plan that meets our Paris commitments, but gets our economy moving again after COVID. So people have questions about it, Vijay, but I'm a politician that actually takes the time to answer the questions. I'm not like Mr. Trudeau that just says things and then does the opposite. I've put forward a plan that I think will get the entire country working again, but will also get emissions down because I say regularly, climate change is important to me as a father of young kids as much as it is as a politician. We owe it to them to get our emissions down, and that's exactly what we'll do.
But do you think that your support for the climate change plan could now impact your party's chances at the ballot box, especially in the areas which have been traditionally your strongholds?
No, I don't. We're going to win in Alberta and Saskatchewan. They have questions, yes, Vijay, but they've been under attack by Justin Trudeau. Our country's divided, Vijay. After 6 years of Mr. Trudeau, we have active separation movements in 3 provinces that weren't there 6 years ago. So I want to bring the country together. That means respecting the provinces, getting people back to work. And I've said we can do that, and we can meet our Paris commitments and get our emissions down. This is why we have a detailed plan. This is why I'm being transparent with people. And I think after years of Mr. Trudeau making false promises on deficits, on safe drinking water, on Indigenous reserves, on everything from reconciliation to job creation, people are tired of being let down by Mr. Trudeau, and I'm giving them a positive vision of Canada back on track with a Conservative government.
Mr. O'Toole, immigration is key to the economic prosperity of our country. But lately, what we've seen, at least for the last few years, LMIA fraud, that's become an open secret. How do you plan to address that, should you form government?
Well, you're right, Vijay. Immigration is critical to our economic success and our recovery. And it's critical to the well-being of families. So you've talked about some of the challenges we have in our skilled immigration and other streams. I want to focus on family reunification and accelerating the backlog that's been created from COVID. I want more family reunification because it helps families with businesses, with childcare needs. We should let families decide what's best for that. And we're going to have a program for childcare that helps families directly. And we want family reunification to help because sometimes an aunt, an uncle, a grandparent can help a family juggle the needs of parents much more than Mr. Trudeau's fantasy of a program 6 years from now that will only help a few people. Let's help all families. Family reunification can do that. And Vijay, the other thing we're going to fix, credential recognition. We need more people having their credentials recognized before they arrive to Canada or very quickly. So I'm going to immediately have a task force to bring everyone to the table to finally solve this issue because it's unfair to see us being short for healthcare workers and us have healthcare workers here waiting years to have their skills recognized. We need to fix this for the families that arrive. We need to fix this for our country.
Mr. O'Toole, this federal election is unlike any other that we've seen in recent history. And especially during this pandemic, Ontario PC Premier Doug Ford is staying detached from this federal election. PCs recently won a majority in Nova Scotia, and their leader categorically distanced his party from yours. Jason Kenney is having his own troubles and issues in Alberta. How do you think all of these problems could impact your chances during this election on September 20th?
They won't impact my chances, Vijay, because Canadians know the difference between federal government and provincial government. And I will work with all provinces, including Premier Horgan. I had very good discussion of BC issues months ago with the Premier. He's NDP, I'm Conservative. Anyone that wants to get the country moving again, deal with the challenges, both economic and health-wise after COVID, I will work with. And I'm known in Ottawa as someone that brings people together. I'm not a celebrity like Mr. Trudeau. I'm known to have a plan and get things done. Maybe it's the military guy in me. You have to have a plan for every mission. And I will work with all parties. And of course, we have some provincial cousins in the PCs, but they're different parties. And we're running on the needs of our country in 2021. And I'll tell you, Vijay, we have the most diverse slate of candidates. We have more women. We have more members of cultural community stepping up because from day one, a year ago when I became leader, I said I want our party to reflect the Canada of 2021, its people, its hopes, its challenges, and our recovery plan will make our country more prosperous, more united, and we'll move it forward together.
Mr. O'Toole, as a former member of the Canadian Armed Forces, when you see everything that's going on in Afghanistan, do you think that all the work on all the accomplishments that there were in the last 20 years, those have been squandered now?
Well, the heartbreaking images out of Afghanistan, Vijay, are hard to watch. And I worry about, under the Taliban, women and young girls being subjected to second-class status again. I was proud of the work done by our men and women over the course of the time in Afghanistan, giving people and women especially those freedoms. And anytime we stand up for the dignity of people, that is a mission worth Canada being a part of. What frustrates me, Vijay, is 5 years ago, I asked the Liberal government to get our translators, to get our contractors home. I wrote ministers. I got one of them back with John McCallum, the first Liberal minister, and then Justin Trudeau fired him, put in a number of other ministers who literally ignored our request to get these people out of Afghanistan because they were at risk because they helped Canada. It's a failure of leadership by Mr. Trudeau, by Mr. Sejan, who actually had translators help him, and he abandoned them. So I will be a leader who actually takes action, doesn't just read the script as Mr. Trudeau does. We need principle, we need action, and those people on the ground in Afghanistan that are at risk because they helped Canada, we need to have their back.
Mr. O'Toole, we've touched upon several issues during this conversation, but if someone was to ask you, why should people vote Conservative this election? What's your elevator pitch to the voter? What would that be?
We need to secure the future, Vijay, for all families in all parts of the country. We've been through a very difficult year and a half, but we need a plan for the future that includes everyone. Canada's recovery plan is our plan to secure that future. This election is about where Canada's going. I think our best days are ahead of us, but we have tired, corrupt government with no plan for the future under Mr. Trudeau. I'm offering a vision, a plan to get people back on its feet, and I'm a new leader with a new approach for Conservatives, and that's what the election's about. Who's going to secure the future for your family?
Mr. O'Toole, thank you so much for doing this, and we look forward to speaking with you again during the course of the campaign and beyond.
Thank you for a great discussion, Vijay, and my very best to all your listeners.
Thank you very much. Have a good day.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.